So we're going to start by drawing out the shape for the lake. I'm going to just take a piece of 1/4 inch MDF. I'm going to use the already straight edge cuts, and I'm just going to draw the corner piece out with a pencil, and then we're just going to cut it out with a jigsaw. This time I'm going to put on my safety goggles, make sure I'm being safe. This is just a regular jigsaw with a standard wood bit in it, nothing fancy. And I'm just going to go around. I really just use the pencil line as a guide. I often don't end up sticking to it, but just give me an idea of where I should be cutting. Now we're going to grab a sander, and we're going to go through and sand the edges. This is a little time consuming. I didn't have a low grit sandpaper on at the time. I just went around and you want to sand it as much as you possibly can. This can take a while. I didn't put a very low grit sandpaper on, so this took me a bit of extra time than it probably normally would. I really just went around and tried to make the transition between the base and the lip as smooth as possible. We also grabbed a tree kit, took the parts out. Had to clip some of these off. The trees come on large dowels with spikes in them. I didn't have my safety goggles for this, so I made sure I turned away. Went around with some super glue, glued the base together. Nothing too difficult here. Then I took them back out to the shop and sanded the base, same way that I sanded the lake base. Again, just trying to get a nice smooth transition. Now it's time to put some SCULPTAMOLD down. This is just SCULPTAMOLD, that's the brand name of the product. You can find it on Amazon or almost anywhere else. It's just a plaster and paper pulp, and you mix water in with it, and it becomes a nice lightweight sculpting compound that you can use to make terrain features or any sort of fills or gradients or that type of thing. I always just mix it with my hands. It gets pretty messy, but this is, I've found, the most effective way to do it quickly and neatly. I'm just going to smear that on the lake piece. Right now I'm not really being very particular about it. I'm just trying to get the material down onto the base. Then I'm going to go in with a chip brush and smooth out the edges. Just trying to make it a nice, even lake shore. I got a little bit in where the water will be, so I sort of just smoothed that out and just tried to make it as neat as possible. I went back in with a piece of scrap wood. You also could use a proper spatula or something and just smoothed out the bank of the lake. I also smoothed off the two edges as well, just to make them look a little neater. We needed this to dry, so I had Connor whip up a makeshift air vent drying piece. Once that was dry, we gave it all a coat of brown paint. Made sure to give it a nice thorough coat on the entire thing. This is kind of just a primer coat. And then we went in with some blue. I went in with sort of like a medium blue first. And then we went in with a light blue along the edges of the shore. Just trying to get that even color gradient. And then finally some black in the darkest parts. Lastly, I had to just clean up the shoreline with some more brown. Once again, putting it under the fan to dry. So now we have all the parts, they're dry and they're ready to start SCENIC. Laid them all out while I grabbed my pieces. The first thing I needed to do was put some texture paste on the trees. So I started with some VALLEJO texture paste. I find that this is easier to control because you don't want any sand in those plate holes. It helps to keep things controlled. If you're using glue and sand, it can get a little messy. So also I used a regular brush for this, and this paint destroys your brushes. So as you can see, this brush is done for. Once all of this is dry, we're going to take some yellow ochre paint and we're just going to give all of the brown just a quick dry brush. This is to add a little bit of texture, again a little bit of color variation. A lot of this is going to get covered with the SCENIC material, but again, this is just really, think of it as an underpainting layer. I wasn't super happy with the dry brushing stage, so I actually opted to go back in with some light brown colored paint and just gave it a very quick little dusting on a few of the part. Now it's time to put the glue on. Just standard white glue, PVA glue. Go around, add it in patches, just the same as we've done in the other episodes. I'm going to start with a 2mm static grass from Scenic Express. I'm going to go around and just sprinkle this across the entire base, get things ready to go. We'll do the same for the tree base as well. Again, we want to put the glue down in an uneven way. You have a little bit of that dirt color showing through, and this is kind of like our base coat. Then give the base a good tap off. Let all of the excess fall onto your work surface. I like to just sort of pile it up, keep the excess for later. Now it's time to go on with the next layer. I'm going to use another Scenic blend from Scenic Express. This one has a bit more shape variation in it. I really like to use this anytime I'm doing like woods and forest floors and things like that. Sometimes it can be helpful to pat it down with your hand just so as many pieces as possible can contact with the glue underneath. We're going to do the same for the tree base again. Just put it on splotchy and in an uneven way. The tree bases as well, again, just put it around randomly. The idea is this is just going to represent kind of leaf scatter and tree fall and all that kind of stuff that you see when there's trees around. One of the last scenic steps for the ground cover is I'm just going to put some dark green leaves in. This is just some super leaf from Scenic Express. Now we're going to get some static grass tufts. I made this sheet myself. This is just baking paper with a whole bunch that I'd made with a static grass applicator. And the idea is we're just going to go around and put these randomly in as many little spots as we can. This really helps to define a different shape and a different texture with the scenic. A lot of times the best effect is being as random as possible. Now we're going to get some deco grass, my favorite. Again, we're just going to go around and put that randomly in different places. You don't need a lot of this, just a little bit. If you are concerned about miniatures being uneven on this type of surface, then use less of it. But again, it's just about creating different textures, a different visual breakup, helps sell it as a bit more of a realistic forest stand. Now it's time for the water. This is a very simple step. What we're going to do is we're going to take some gloss Mod Podge and some Liquitex gloss gel and some dark blue paint. I'm going to mix the Mod Podge and the Liquitex gel together. The reason I mix the two is because the Liquitex gel has a much thicker body and the Mod Podge covers better. And I've found that mixing these two tends to get the best effect. I don't use much of the Liquitex gel, just enough to add a bit of extra body and hold to the mixture. And then we're just going to add some blue paint directly to this mix. Just start with a few drops. Don't go overboard. at the beginning, just add it bit by bit, kind of work your way into it. What it looks like now is going to be very different to what it looks like when it's dry. So you have to have a bit of faith in yourself and just kind of go for it. I'm going to go through with a brush and I'm just going to sort of sponge it on and create texture and waves. Because this is a lake and not an ocean, we don't have to worry about making sort of waves coming into shore. It's really just about sort of creating that water ripple effect. The last thing I did was I went through and just blended the color up on the shoreline just a little bit more. We're going to add a few plants. I got some aquarium plants that I had pre-sprayed with some green. I got some laser cut plants that I made earlier, and then an old brush. First thing I glued down was some of the aquarium plants. We just attached those with super glue. You can go a bit heavier on these if you want a thicker forest, but I just kind of added one or two just for a bit of extra visual interest. Same with the laser cut plants as well. I mostly just wanted to experiment with them. This is something that we're toying around with maybe producing, so wanted to see how they looked. This old brush, I'm going to spray it green, and this is going to be the start of our reeds that we're going to add to the lake. Simply just cut it out and then set it aside to dry, and we want to keep a nice mix of the green and the brown that was in the brush. So we're just going to wait for the gel to dry up, and here you can see as it dries it changes color. And then once that's dry, we're going to take the reeds and then we're going to start gluing them just into the waterline. Pretty much just go through with some super glue. You can also use hot glue for this, but I had super glue on hand, so it's a bit more straightforward for me. We're just going to go around and add a few little tufts here and there. You can make them thicker, you can make them more sparse if you want, but this is kind of the effect that I chose to replicate. And again, this is just a little bit of visual interest. This isn't designed to be realistic. This is more representational. So now it's time to glue all of the scenic material down. We're going to start with just some water, some soap, and some white glue. We're going to start by mixing the glue and the water together. You want a fairly thin consistency on this. You really don't need it to be very thick. The idea is we want to put it all over the scenic and let it flow in. Make sure you give it a good mix. Make sure there's no clumps of glue or anything like that. And just dip your finger in and then rub it between two fingers, and there should be a bit of a bite to the glue still. It's very slight, but it should just be enough to know that it's still going to glue. Add a little bit of soap. This is just to break the surface tension. And then we're going to get a pipette, and we're just going to start dripping it into the scenic. I'm going to go around bit by bit. You also can pre-wet the scenic with some water as well. This can help, but I chose to just go straight into the gluing stage. Go around, add some, and it's going to flow in and kind of grab hold of everything. You really don't need a lot of glue. Just make sure you clean up any of the glue that gets onto your water effects. And that's it. Another project complete. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a nice corner lake and some trees for your gaming table. This would be perfect for a game of Don't Look Back. As always, make sure you like and subscribe, and also please drop a comment down below on what you want to see me do next. Until next time, thanks for watching.